Hi, my name is Mark Crawley, and welcome to Diversita Connect. And today we're going to be talking about a very key subject, and this is the government initiative or program called Access to Work. So we'll talk a little bit more about what Access to Work is in a second, but this is part one of two sessions. It's one of those pieces of assistance that the government offer that is sometimes reasonably difficult to navigate, certainly to start. But we've got some good advice, hopefully, that will help our community, and also give you some up-to-date information around access to work. So let's get started. So access to work. What is access to work, or ATW, as the acronym says? It's a government-funded scheme in the UK, and it provides support for disabled people and those with health conditions to start or stay in work. And this obviously includes neurodivergent individuals. It offers grants and practical support tailored to individual needs, and it removes or aims to remove barriers that individuals face in the workplace. What's really interesting about access to work from neurodivergent individuals is that, based around the incredible challenges of trying to get a diagnosis as an adult, it does take self-disclosure into account. So if you self-disclose or self-identify as autistic, dyslexic, etc., then you can apply for access to work, and it focuses very much around the areas and things that you need. I think by last count, it offers funding based around need and some assessment, a value of up to £65,000 per year. So it's, for a while, it was one of the best kept secrets within in terms of the help that people get, particularly in the workplace. But now it's becoming more utilised, and there's a couple of challenges around that, but we'll cover those in a second. So what does it cover? So it covers areas like equipment, first of all. For example, if you're dyslexic and you require Grammarly or some tools or digital tools, then it can help with those. If you have any physical challenges, then it can help with things like raised desks and chairs and other areas, etc. It can also help with travel. And particularly if you struggle with day-to-day travel, and it can include areas, for example, if you have a lot of anxiety traveling on public transport, it can help. Again, after maybe a conversation or an assessment, it can help with travel funding. Support workers, areas like job coaches, interpreters, or personal assistants, very much so, particularly on coaching. Mental health support. I recently done my own application and received a coach for ADHD and some mental health support, which was great. Communication support in terms of day-to-day communication needs, again, particularly around areas like speech to text and things like that. Coaching, so outside of just job coaching, ADHD coaching in particular, and obviously trying to navigate your way through potentially an ADHD journey, it can be quite important. So you'll see a lot on LinkedIn, particularly around ADHD coaches, and it's sometimes quite a polarizing subject, but ADHD coaching is one of those areas which can be included as can coaching for any neurotype. But also what's quite interesting is it can help with awareness training. So what's great here is that access to work can help the individual. So, for example, if you're autistic and you work within a team, there's some areas that can help you make sure that you have an equitable opportunity to provide your skill set on a day-to-day basis. But there's also a great opportunity to train the people in the environment around you to understand a little bit more around autism. So the onus is not just on the neurodivergent person to change, which is, to be honest, is a lot of the time is the circumstances that we see. What's great about this is that it can provide support for your environment. So yeah. The type of things it cover, there's more than this, of course, right? This is just a bit of an overview, but these are the type of areas that you can get some assistance with. So To apply for it, there is obviously a government website that you apply to. You will need to have an account set up via the government, but most people do. I don't believe it's the same account that you may have for your tax account or anything like that. But again, when you apply online, it'll give you the opportunity to go through that process and give you a step-by-step opportunity. There's some assistance guides on there in areas like that, but again, it's one of those areas that we've done a few times now, and we will talk a little bit more about some of the assistance we can give to our Diversity Connect community. But once you've done it a couple of times, and we can certainly give some good advice around it. It's not as daunting as you'd imagine. It really isn't. So how to make an application? So you can apply online, which is what most people do. You can also apply by phone or post. If you're self-employed, so if you are a sole trader or you're part of a limited company, you would need your unique tax reference number. There is definitely an importance about providing detailed information about your needs, and this can be quite challenging, particularly when you start to be quite honest around some of the areas you find challenging on a day-to-day basis. It can be a little bit triggering, but it is important that you have some information, you can lay it out clearly. The assessment process, once they receive your application, it may require an assessment process, and I'll be honest, at the moment we're seeing that quite a lot. The government, due to volumes recently and due to the quite long waiting list, which we'll talk about in a second, it may involve a third-party organisation to do the review. More often than not, you are required to give a point of contact as your employer, just to make them aware that you are receiving support, and so that's someone obviously that you ideally have disclosed to, or someone that you trust. A HR contact's normally a good point of contact, but if you have a very good relationship with the person you report directly to, particularly in smaller businesses where there may not be a HR function, that can always be quite useful. And look, you may be required to provide evidence of your disability or health condition, and we don't really see people being asked to provide evidence that they're neurodivergent. What they do tend to focus on is the areas you struggle with, and some of the things that they suggest that may help. So it tends to be quite solution driven. That said, of course, it's probably not a comfortable call or a comfortable application process for everyone, and we understand that. So again, it's one of those areas to maybe do a little bit of research on. If you're doing the online application in particular, you can take your time. I think you can revisit and save the application in terms of progress, but it's always good to maybe, particularly when you're talking about what you need and some of the areas, then it's good to have something already written out. The pros of access to work, right? So there's some great stuff, right? Access to work, I think, gets a little bit of a bad rap, and rightly so in a lot of instances. But I would say if you're looking at the key pros around this, right, you are looking at if you receive some support, it can give you increased independence and job satisfaction. It really can. It can mean that suddenly you find that you're working in an environment, and you start looking at it through a different lens, right? You have more understanding, or you have some digital tools to help, or you've had some coaching to help, or your team's been trained. It can really help. One of the key challenges for small organizations is the fact that they'll say, this is going to cost us a lot of money, right? We haven't got the money to do that. So this gives financial support for necessary adaptations. And because of that, it removes the objection from your employer. What it can do is just provide you that platform, right? We mentioned it at the start here, but that equitable platform to succeed at work is something that we talk to organizations around all the time. So that could be great. And then the knock-on effect is that if you start to perform better at work, it may open up more career opportunities, but it also may mean that you're not wasting a lot of energy, sometimes trying to navigate the working environment through masking or through having to recheck things or navigate tools that are just not fit for purpose. So it has a domino effect a lot of the time. Now, there is also a wide range of assistance available. I will say it's changing a little bit, and there's a lot more scrutiny now than there used to be. Some people used to get sort of dozens of hours of coaching support and remarkable tool pads and all of this other stuff. There's a little bit more scrutiny around it now, and I had quite a challenging experience with my Access to Work application recently, which I'll share in a moment. So some of the challenges here is there's no doubt that the application process can be lengthy, quite triggering and complex. However, it's not just that, it's the waiting time once you put your application in, and it can take 6 to 9 months. And I think at the moment that's a genuine sort of time frame to expect. Because of that, obviously there's a delay in the amount of support you get. Now there's a couple of not ways around this, but there's a couple of variations to this, but we'll talk about those in a sec. The other thing is that funding may not cover all costs, right? We talked about the cap, but there's sometimes a contribution that's needed from your employer. The variability in assessment outcomes, especially recently, it's incredible. Some people will receive lots of stuff, some people will receive next to nothing. It just sometimes depends on who you're talking to. And as I mentioned already, a lot of this has been outsourced to third-party organizations. So the level of service or level of assessment that people get in there varies quite a lot. Obviously, the delays in receiving support, and we talked about already, it can take a long time. But even after that, I remember I had my assessment after 9 months, and then it took probably another 6 weeks before I even received a sort of an allowance, and even that was by post, which didn't come through, and then et cetera, et cetera. So the other thing is obviously it's quite an intrusive process in some ways, and again, particularly depends on the assessor you get, if you have to have an assessor. Yeah, there can be sometimes some quite intrusive questions. Often for large organizations, you'll need your employer's support, or at least a point of contact. Some people are comfortable to do that, and particularly if they haven't disclosed. But this is the biggest challenge, right? Is that despite the name, right, it doesn't actually offer access to work. It offers you some access and assistance in work, but you have to be working. You have to be working or about to start a role, and it's a guaranteed role that you're about to start to receive support. So there's obviously other initiatives through the DWP and job centres, etc., but they're wildly erratic. So Access to Work is at the moment for someone who is working, and that is obviously a little bit of a contradiction in terms. So what applications are prioritized? And this is one of the only variations that we've seen so far. So if you are about to start a role, so for example, I receive a job offer today. I'm due to start a role in a month's time. If I put in an application and said my start date was, say, the 10th of April, that would be prioritized. That would be prioritized about someone who works in a role currently and is asking for some additional support. So if you're about to start a role, it's a good idea to put an application in, and a good opportunity, particularly if you've gone through a process where you've disclosed you in the interview and application process and you feel quite comfortable. It's a good way of trying to bring this timeline down to closer to a month rather than 6 weeks. We have seen occasionally people's allowances being made a bit quicker if they just ask for 1 or 2 things, and particularly coaching services. And so if you're going in there and you say, look, I want this, I want a raised desk, I want some additional new laptop, I want some other things. I'm not saying it always happens, but we are seeing the fact that those applications tend to take the full 9 months. If you're going in there and just saying, look, and you do your application to say that I just want some 12 weeks of ADHD coaching support, then it can sometimes be a little bit quicker. There's nothing else as far as we can see that where you see your application prioritized. We went through a period where we were trying to get some support for people through Access to Work for interview support. but it's not fit for purpose for neurodivergent individuals, and they've made it very clear they don't offer that type of support. It's more around interpreters and assisting people with physical disabilities. So as we mentioned already, the application process can take around 6 to 9 months, and due to the increase in awareness around access to work, I don't see that coming down anytime soon. So, and what we're seeing also, as I mentioned already, is an inconsistent level of service, an inconsistent level of allowances. But again, it'd be great to see anyone who watches this and has had an experience with access to work, just to give, I suppose, their take around it. So why is this beneficial for employers? So if you have to get your employer involved, or you feel more comfortable getting your employer involved, it's always good to make sure that they understand that this is a really positive thing, right? So obviously employers do have a legal duty based around the Equalities Act to make reasonable adjustments and to make sure you have an environment that gives you the platform to succeed. And because of this, access to work really complements employers' responsibilities. A lot of employers, genuinely smaller businesses, right, will struggle with the cost around implementing certain things, and this can help with that. It really can. And I think what's good about it is that if you've got your application in, a lot of employers will potentially upfront the costs, right, or try to make sure that you have the level of support you need. And it might be a bit of a compromise at that point, but ultimately the actual process is that you should have to wait, ideally, to see what you're actually allocated. Because of access to work, you like to think retention will be better, employees will feel more valued, improve morale, more productive, etc. But what's also good is that this can take adjustments and I suppose giving the right environment to someone above just the legal obligations or reasonable adjustments. This can really help, right, with long-term strategies, particularly areas like coaching and job support and those type of things. So again, access to work is quite interesting. And whereas the neurodiversity community is starting to know a little bit more about access to work, employers are still relatively uneducated around this. So again, it's one of those things that you may have to self-advocate around. So again, looking at one of the previous sessions around self-advocating and self-promotion, it might be a good idea to have a look at some of the tips we offered there. So how can we help, right? So we've learned a lot, right, but we are not experts around this, but there's some things that we can do, and we have the opportunity to be able to do at the moment, which is great. So we can offer advice, right? So just message us, and obviously under questions there will be this webinar, so you can always make some comments under there, but just feel free to DM one of the team, and we can always try to give a bit of advice there. If you are a tier 3 member, you get free application support from a professional up to 1 hour. And what that would mean is when you go and do the online application, we would have someone who would do that with you. And the person we use at the moment is fantastic. They used to work for Access to Work, so they know the type of language to use. They know the type of vernacular that will land well. They know the type of things that may get signed off, and they can just help you fill in the applications, just so you know it's gone and it's been received in the right way. It's like when you used to do an application for a passport, and you used to get someone at the post office to check it. You just feel a little bit more reassured that it's happening and it's going to be sent in the right way. So tier 3 members, if you're interested in doing Access to Work application, let me know. We'll fund that hour and get your application in. The other thing is we can provide some of the services. So if you're interested in talking to us about the services, particularly things like awareness training and some job support, we can do those. And if not, we have some great partners we can recommend. And I take partner relationships incredibly seriously. I really do, and I ask the team to make sure we do so as well. We don't just recommend anyone because of cost or anything like that. They have to be people that are focused on supporting the neurodiversity community and do it for the right reasons as well. So yeah, we can definitely help in a variety of ways. But I would highly recommend, if you're a tier 3 member, to contact us and get that Access to Work application in, because it can be great. It can really good, and it can give you some stuff that you haven't had before, and it can really assist you as well. So next steps, as always, we have a post about this session in questions. We'd love to hear about your experience with Access to Work. We really would. It's as they say, it's not for everyone, right? And it is hard sometimes, and it can be quite triggering. It can be quite lengthy. My feeling is with it is that it's good to get an application and see where it lands. But it's one of those areas that if you're relying on totally, then it can be quite a challenging situation. So the next session, I'll provide a bit more information about the actual process itself, and including some of the documentation that comes through. But I'll also talk about my experience, right, and my allowance and exactly what I got and why I was a little bit frustrated with it, but also I'd say quite an interesting conversation with the assessor. So yeah, I look forward to sharing that with you, just to give everyone a bit more of an insight as to what it actually can be like. But listen, thank you again for watching, as always. I hope this has been useful. As I say, this is not an all-encompassing, detailed overview of Access to Work, but it should give you a good starting position. And look, we're there to help, right? So please reach out to us on the questions or the DM in. And as I mentioned already, if you're a tier 3 member, get in contact and we will get that application sorted for you as soon as we can. So thanks again. And I look forward to seeing you on the next session. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share and subscribe. And scan the QR code to join the Diversa Connect community.